welcome to the Janelle King Show. I'm Janelle King. This is Extra 106.3, and this is where we discuss kitchen table topics that are typically banned from family gatherings but are absolutely necessary in order to have a strong republic. And today's table topic is one that we have got to start talking about, and it's understanding voting blocks. And this is part one, and we're going to talk about Republicans today. So I'd already had this in mind, but the breakup that we're seeing between Trump and MTG is definitely something that all ties into this. So we're going to address it all. You know, when I came into the party, now almost 15 years ago, I understood that there were political parties. What I understood was that there was Republicans and there were Democrats, right? I had to learn about the Libertarian Party, and I had to learn about the Green Party and all the other different parties. But from my understanding, there were just two political parties. And for the most part, many voters at that time voted straight ticket, right? They voted right down the party line. And to some degree, that still happens, but not as much as it did back then. Independent voters were kind of a non-factor because they were much smaller in number as it relates to their influence on elections. And then Libertarians was a party that could hurt Republicans, but they didn't turn out as much in mass, so it wasn't a huge deterrent. However, it just kind of forced Republicans to campaign a little bit harder, and they typically would win. And I'm talking about here in Georgia, living in a red state. But then something changed. In 2015, President Trump entered the presidential race, and he kind of set the game on fire because he wasn't playing the traditional political game. He didn't try to win over the active voters who were already a part of the system, so to speak. Instead, he went for inactive voters, or what we would call low propensity voters. And these are voters that are often overlooked, often pushed to the side, mainly because they weren't considered as useful. Why? Because they didn't fit into a particular category or a voting block. And oftentimes, politically, you want to go after groups because you can then shift the board a lot faster with minimum effort, right? So, in other words, if I spoke to all black and brown voters, like we see happening on the Democrat side, what you'll see is a lot of people trying to go after that vote because if I can get 93% of all black people or all brown people, then that's half the work done, right? So I don't have to go out there and do the old school retail politics, campaigning and talking to all these different individuals. I can now speak to voting blocks. The same thing goes for women voters and college educated voters and all these different voting blocks that we now have. The list can go on and on and on. However, the voters that President Trump's team was going after, these low propensity voters, many of them were low income white voters, mostly men and blue collar, and they attended the school of the hard knocks. They didn't go to these grand universities, they weren't Ivy League students. They attended the school of hard knocks. For the most part, these are really, really good people. And I have to give credit to Kellyanne Conway, who saw that there was room to create this new voter base, and that is what happened. MAGA voters were born. Mind you, before that, we had our Tea Party voters, and a lot of our MAGA voters are our Tea Party voters. So let's not get it twisted. You know, there were still people in the party that kind of felt and dealt and agree with a lot of things that President Trump was pushing at that time. However, getting them as activated as they did was a Trump thing. And MAGA voters were born. Trump beat out all the other Republicans because he went after all Americans and not just those who were registered as Republicans or active. These are voters who mostly vote every 4 years. You're not going to get them oftentimes when it comes to some of these off years, which we just saw. And they typically come out if there's somebody on the ballot that they truly believe understands them and understands their concerns. Well, as a result, Trump won, and now he has control over a lot of the base. So fast forward to today, and we see this rift that's brewing between the MAGA factions of the party. And this Trump and MTG split is one of those things that I believe is more of a communation of people already feeling the divide rather than it manifesting. So the public breakup that we're seeing right now is more of a manifestation of what's happening. And I really do plan to address my thoughts on the breakup. And I'm going to go deep into it because I have a lot of thoughts regarding this. But I'm going to do it at the end of the show, along with sharing a personal story that I have with MTG. But I think it'll all make sense as we break it down. But first, I thought it would be helpful to address these subgroups to educate people on what are the subgroups or the factions that exist within the Republican Party that are present themselves within these two major parties, starting with the Republican Party, because we have to be clear. Factions is not synonymous to one party. They're everywhere and they're steadily growing, and we're definitely seeing this. Before we talk about these factions of today, let's go back a little bit because I always like to go back historically to our forefathers and what they had to say about certain topics and certain subjects. And I found some information on what some of our forefathers had to say about parties and factions. So let's start with George Washington. So George Washington is famously warned us against the dangers of political factions in his farewell address. He believed that political parties could lead to divisiveness. He also believed that it can lead towards an erosion of national unity. He viewed factions as a threat to the common good, arguing that they could prioritize their interests over those of the country. Keep that in mind. Washington also cautioned that factions could lead to the spirit of party rather than, and I'm adding this part, but rather than the spirit of America. He felt that it could lead to the quote unquote spirit of party and begin dominating politics, which could lead to ultimately a fracture in the nation. Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson initially saw political parties as a necessary evil, and he believed that they could help organize political thought and action. He also warned that they could easily become overly polarized. Then there was James Madison, who we often call the father of the Constitution. Well, in Federalist Paper number 10, he recognized that factions are a natural part of human society. In other words, human nature says we're going to click up. And Madison argued that the Constitution was designed to control the effects of factions by creating a large republic where various interests could compete. He believed that several factions would actually protect against tyranny and that no single faction could dominate the political landscape. And then on the flip side, you had Alexander Hamilton. He had a more favorable view of political factions, seeing them as a way to bring about necessary change and debate. Hamilton believed that a strong central government was essential to managing these factions and maintaining order. He understood that political parties could drive progress, but he also recognized the need for a strong executive to keep them in check. Now, while our founding fathers had differing views on political parties and factions, one of the things they had in common is that they all recognized the potential pitfalls. They understood that factions could lead to division and conflict, but they also saw the necessity for organized political thought. Personally, I'm okay with factions because it allows us to hear from people who has taken an important part of our republic or important topic and has put a lot of their time and energy into fighting to maintain it. And I do think that there are so many elements of our country, there's so many elements of our republic that, it can become overwhelming. It can feel overwhelming if you were literally putting all of your blood, sweat, and tears into trying to understand every aspect of our republic. So factions, in my opinion, work when it comes down to that. But the problem is when the faction turns into a party. That's when we all have a problem. When that faction now believes that we all have to get on board with the subject matter that they support and that we must also support it, or we are no longer necessary, or then we become the problem. And I have to be clear when I say that I saw this. I saw this coming. I saw this coming a long time ago. When we started calling people rhinos and then separating like who's a true MAGA and who's not, and doing these litmus tests, and we weren't just disagreeing, we were becoming mean. We were kicking people out, we were voting people out, we were doing all these things, all in the name of I am standing up for my faction. We believed that we were standing up for what was right. We all thought that this is what it took, right? In order to drain the swamp, we have to kick people out. No. No. You drain the swamp by electing the right people. After the break, I'm going to break down some core factions of the Republican Party, what they stand for, what they believe, and what they're looking for in a candidate. So don't leave the table. We're just getting started. You're listening to the Janelle King Show right here on Extra 106.3. We'll be right back. Hey everyone, I just want to take a quick moment to say thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for all of your support, and thank you because we have hit our initial goal of 500 subscribers. Woo! And I couldn't be more grateful, and I couldn't have done it without you. So now it's time to set a new goal. My new goal is 1,000 subscribers. I know we can do it. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Don't just watch, participate, become a part of this unafraid, unapologetic, always seeking the truth community. Your support helps us keep the content coming and growing and rocking and rolling. Thank you so much for being with us, and I appreciate each and every one of you. Welcome back to the Janelle King Show right here on Extra 106.3, and this is where we discuss kitchen table topics that are typically banned from family gatherings but are absolutely necessary in order to have a strong republic. And today's table topic is understanding voting blocks and all the different factions, and we're starting with the Republican Party for part one. I opened up by talking a little bit about the Trump and MTG breakup and how that plays into what I planned to talk about this week anyway, as we enter the holidays, because I do think it's important to know what's going on so that when you sit down at your kitchen table, to all my kitchen table debaters, you're able to fully understand the type of Republican that you are talking to. So let's talk about it. Let's break it down. First, let me clarify something, that this is my perspective. This is from my vantage point. So all the insights that I'm going to share are generalizations that I have picked up from talking to people, from being on the ground, from being around the party for a number of years, and these are my beliefs. Your specific beliefs may not be represented in every single point, and there may be some traits that may resonate with you while also fitting others. This discussion is not about any individual politician, it's not about elected officials, but rather it's about underlining principles and values that define each of the groups that I have seen within our party. So let's get started. And let's start with the most common, the classic Republican. The classic Republican, these Republicans emphasize a blend of conservatism and social values and fiscal conservatism. They have a strong belief in capitalism and the benefits of free enterprise and competition. They generally take a pragmatic and a moderate stance to political issues. They believe in maintaining a strong U.S. presence on the world stage, and they support reasonable environmental protections while balancing economic growth. These are your I'm not here to rock the boat Republicans. But I do not want to see the other side get into power or control because their rocking of the boat will then force me to have to rock the boat. They believe in the fundamentals of our government formation. They are a lot like your constitutional Republicans, which we would get into, but just not as technical. They're a little bit more common sense voters, but not your more innovative voters, because to them it doesn't need any type of real innovation. Just do what has worked in the past and let it be. The type of candidates that they support are policy focused candidates who focuses on fiscal responsibility, moderate, more balanced governance, and fostering economic growth while addressing some of these social issues. They are hand in hand with economic issues. Okay? So that's your classic Republican. Now, let's talk about our constitutional Republicans. Constitutional Republicans have a strong belief in following the U.S. Constitution as a supreme law and interpreting it literally. They advocate for minimal government intervention in both personal and economic matters. They value state sovereignty and they believe in the importance of local governance over federal control. They prioritize civil liberties and personal freedoms as fundamental rights. They support balanced budgets and limited government spending, strongly defend the right to bear arms, and believe in minimal restrictions on gun ownership. These are your Federalist Paper Republicans. These are the people who believe that the Constitution covers any and all challenges that we may face today. And if it doesn't directly or explicitly mention the particular challenge or issue that we're facing today in the Constitution, then the effects of that policy should not, and it better not, infringe on any portion of the Constitution. They do not believe the Constitution is a living, growing document. They believe that it's set, and the way it is the way it is. They are firm believers in rights, particularly personal rights that are endowed by God as well as this country. They want to see their elected officials and those candidates who they support, they want to see them focus on protecting constitutional rights, on reducing federal power. They do not want the government to have more power than the states, and on maintaining individual freedoms. They hold tightly to the Bill of Rights. We've got to make sure that what you're doing does not stand on my freedoms. These are the people who believe that you have the right to succeed in this country as well as you have the right to fail in this country. But the choice should be yours. I can't talk about our constitutional Republicans without going into our next set of Republicans, which is our mountain Republicans. Now, this may not be as prevalent in other states, but mountain Republicans are very, very unique. These are your moonshiners, your fried apple pies, your boiled peanut Republicans. These are your MAGA Republicans mixed in with your constitutional Republicans with a little bit of your classic Republicans. These are the people who have seen opioid addiction run rampant in their communities. These are your, I don't need the government because the government has never looked out for me. They are the voters who have dealt with their children stealing their medicines out of medicine cabinets and becoming addicted, teen pregnancies, abject poverty. These are those voters. And I know I've named some of the worst stuff in the beginning because I needed you to understand that there's a large portion of these voters who are really being directly hit by poor policy. It's a ton of small business owners. A lot of these people are cattle ranchers and they own orchards and vineyards and they are being slammed by regulation. So while they agree with all the other stuff that we just listed with the other types of Republicans, these are unique Republicans. I want to talk about them because they are the Republicans that Marjorie Taylor Greene represents. They are the Republicans that are very vocal about being ignored. Because all they want is to live a good life without assistance of the government. They want to be put in a position where they can take care of themselves, take care of their neighbors, go to church, have small community events where they meet and hang out with their friends. They're truly good people who want to see their elected officials do what they say they're going to do. They want representatives to hear them and see them and no longer overlook them. And that leads me to MAGA voters. Now, many of these voters, these mountain voters and southern voters, many of them are MAGA voters. So let's talk about what are MAGA voters. MAGA voters are voters who have a strong sense of national pride and belief in American exceptionalism. They advocate for policies that prioritize American workers, industries, and interests over foreign ones. They emphasize the importance of secure borders and immigration reform to protect jobs and national security. They support local businesses and manufacturing, and they favor policies that encourage domestic production. They're part of more of a populist movement, connecting with everyday Americans by addressing their concerns and frustrations and rejecting the elite and establishment Republicans. You see, MAGA was built out of voters who were fed up with politics as usual. These are voters who wanted to see an elected official who wasn't afraid to fight for what is right. They wanted to speak truth to power, and they want to see people who hold people accountable, particularly those in their own party, thus the fight against the swamp. These voters often follow the lead of President Trump, and his endorsements are quite coveted because of this. And ultimately, they want what's best for the country. They are not anti-helping our allies, but they want to make sure that we place America first, and then we can help others. They understand the role of foreign relations, but they do not want to feel like our support of other countries supersedes the support of Americans. If you understand MAGA, then you should be able to understand the split. Because this leads me to a brand new faction that we're seeing on the rise that I believe is at the core of some of the split that we've seen between, which I believe may be part of the root cause of the split between Trump and MTG. And this new faction is called the America First, America Only. This group of voters are at the center of many of our discussions today. These are your MTG supporters, but they're not anti-Trump, at least not yet. These are voters that are what you call MAGA adjacent. So they were once MAGA, but they feel as though something's happening, meaning that they were bored out of MAGA, but they feel like they're not getting exactly what they were promised. So they will say that they agree with the MAGA type, but with a few changes. Or better yet, they go a bit further and have less patience with failed promises or missed opportunities. They have a strong belief in prioritizing American sovereignty over international agreements and organizations. They advocate for policies that directly benefit American citizens only, such as healthcare, jobs, and education. They support strict immigration policies, emphasizing border security and reducing illegal immigration. But they want to do it, but they don't want to do it at the pain point of hurting them. They favor tariffs and trade policies that protect American jobs and industries from foreign competition. They champion policies that prioritize hiring and supporting American workers over outsourcing. Therefore, you will hear MTG talk a lot about the HB1 visas. They don't want that. They want everything to come from America. They're skeptical of globalization and international trade agreements that are perceived to harm American interests, and they display a strong sense of pride in American culture, history, and values. These new American First, America Only advocates for strong law enforcement and policies that ensure public safety and support for the military, although they don't want to go to war. They value local communities and grassroots initiatives over federal government solutions and actively participate in political rallies, town halls, community discussions so that their voice can be heard, and only to support candidates who are aligned with the America First principles. Their message is quite simple: America first, America only. At least until we have a strong and rebuilt society. They want us to fix our healthcare woes. They want us to create better and more jobs, particularly in rural America. They are anti-war for any reason unless we are attacked. So that's your America First, America Only. Now we have to go to our quiet but certainly enforced. They can absolutely change an election cycle, and their voice is heard, but it's more of a collective voice than it is these individual leaders or individuals who are kind of like drawing all the attention. And that's your MAGA Republicans and your biblical Republicans. So let's talk about MAGA. MAGA Republicans, or your Make America Healthy Again Republicans. They prioritize policies that promote the overall health and well-being of the population, emphasizing preventive care and wellness. They advocate for affordable and accessible healthcare options for Americans, including insurance reforms and expanded services. They support initiatives that promote healthy eating, physical activity, and lifestyle changes to combat chronic diseases rather than going to big pharma and using medications. They emphasize the importance of mental health services and reducing stigma around mental health issues. They advocate for policies that protect the environment, recognizing the link between a healthy environment and public health care. They promote preventative measures, and they like to kind of lean into the holistic, more natural options, but they're not necessarily anti-vax, although you will find anti-vax people a part of this group too. And these are people who truly believe that our health and our wellness is a part of our control, and it is something that we should be responsible for as individuals. They love their families, and they believe that our products have changed and that we have all these new ingredients and everything that's ultimately killing us. And many of these voters were RFK supporters and were willing to support the Republican Party because of its acceptance of RFK and the role that he was given. These voters, when looking for candidates to support, they focus on improving healthcare systems. So voters who understand the healthcare challenges, that address public health crises, that ensure that health policies prioritize the well-being of individuals and their communities. So your MAGA voters are not going to get wrapped up in all the other stuff. But once you start talking about being healthy, paying attention to what's happening with our food, they get involved. So if you want to get MAGA Republicans activated, start coming after our health, our well-being, our food, and things that we are supposed to be in control of when it comes to ourselves. Last but certainly not least is another subgroup that is certainly quiet, but definitely speaks as a voting bloc versus individually, and that's your biblical Republicans. Our biblical Republicans are strongly influenced by Christian beliefs, emphasizing the role of faith in public life and policy. They advocate for traditional family values and policies that align with biblical teachings. They firmly oppose abortion and support policies that protect the sanctity of life. They support educational policies that promote moral and ethical teachings aligned with biblical principles, often emphasizing strong U.S.-Israel relations based on biblical and historical ties. These voters see things from a biblical world view. They address politics through the lens of Christianity, and faith comes before any candidate. These are your Vice President Pence voters. the voters that are like, okay, I get it. Everyone is like over here supporting one particular person. Everybody loves, I get it, I get it. However, they don't really care, because Christianity is always going to top anything you can say to them, any person or any political policy. If it's not adequately processed through the lens of Christianity, where they can see how this is in alignment with a biblical worldview, that is the only way you would get them to support you. These are voters who support what they believe God supports. And they are completely against moral destruction and corruption. These are voters that focus on supporting candidates who has a strong spiritual relationship with God, and they promote faith-based values in governance. They like candidates who protect religious freedoms and advocate for pro-life policies. These are your voters that are very, very connected to what God believes and who God is. I absolutely see myself in the biblical Republican space. But I know friends who are primarily biblically Republican. And I tend to set it as my first stop. So the first thing is, where does this policy fall when it comes to the biblical worldview? Then I tend to lean into where the mountain people are. I like to take care of myself. I want to have control over my own stuff and over myself. Then you have a little bit, you will find a little bit of the classical Republicans in me and a lot of the constitutional Republicans. So that's why I don't pick a side, because I agree with a lot of these Republicans. The Mahas, I mean, I was raised holistic, so I am 100% Maha. I mean, there's just a lot that I agree with all these different factions. However, we have them. And now that there are a lot of different types of Republicans, because you can create all kinds of combinations from these voters and these factions as well, I hope you see that there is a generalization that tends to separate these groups just a tad. And what you'll find is that generally most Republicans have been found to fit in one or more of these listed factions. So which are you? Where do you find yourself? And did you forget, and did I forget a group that you believe should be generally discussed that I'm missing? Let me know. Drop it in the comment section. I want to know. Let me know. But after the break, I'm going to address my thoughts on the Trump MTG divide and what I believe needs to be understood in order to get support from all Republicans, because I truly believe that the party has severely misunderstood, because I do believe that the party has been severely misunderstood and misguided by narratives. So let's dive in after the break. We're almost finished. You're listening to the Janelle King Show right here on Extra 106.3. We'll be right back. Don't leave the table.
Hello, everyone. My name is Suzanne Guy, and this is the Church's Moment. There is an incredible opportunity to start a distinct pro-life ministry at your church. We started one at our church about 5 years ago, and the fruit has been tangibly beautiful. We do monthly meetings that educate and equip the body of believers on sanctity of human life issues from womb to tomb by bringing in and featuring different pro-life leaders from all over Georgia, as well as featuring different ministries like post-abortion healing ministries or foster care ministries. There are so many great community partners out there. And then the second part of this pro-life ministry is having a care team. This is an opportunity to show moms in crisis, moms in unplanned, unwanted, or crisis pregnancies, that the church is the place to run to, that the church is a safe haven and a place to go for tangible help real hope, true compassion, friendship, and discipleship, and yes, an opportunity to share the gospel in both word and deed. Brothers and sisters in Christ, will you consider starting a distinct pro-life ministry at your church? It's so easy. Please contact me today to find out how simple this is. You can contact me at my email, proverbs31:8@att.net. This is the church's moment.
Welcome back to the Janelle King Show. I'm Janelle King, and this is Extra 106.3, and this is where we discuss kitchen table topics that are typically banned from family gatherings but are absolutely necessary in order to have a strong republic. And today's table topic has been understanding voting blocks, particularly part one, which is the Republican side. So before the break, I talked about what our forefathers thought about factions and different groups within political parties and political parties as a whole. I also talked about and broke down the different factions of the Republican Party that I have been privy to, that I've witnessed, I've talked to, and hopefully you now have a better understanding of the Republican that's at the table beside you. And I think it'll be fun during this holiday break to try to see which Republican am I and which Republican am I sitting beside. That'll be quite fun at the kitchen table. As we close the show, I want to close talking about the MTG and Trump breakup. I saw it coming way before 2025. So for those of you who may not know what's happening, Trump said that he's no longer endorsing Marjorie Taylor Greene. They're no longer friends. He calls her a traitor. He said that the moment he sent a poll showing that she could not beat John Ossoff, it's when all of a sudden things changed. And that was his take on it. And MTG said that she believes that this has to do with the Epstein files and her continuing to call for the Epstein files. I personally believe that it's a little bit of both. I do think that Marjorie Taylor Greene wants to run for office. I do think that she wants to expand a bit out of the 14th district. And I think she realizes that that may be a problem. But let's start with Trump first. I truly believe that Trump is a corporate Republican at heart, and that we've always known that. But I think that there were some Republicans that thought that they can make him somebody that he is not. I think they thought that they can control him or mold him with their vote into being someone else. But we supported him because he spoke the truth to power. We all saw that Dave Chappelle skit where he talked about how Trump completely changed the game when he was debating Hillary, and he basically said that there was these loopholes and all these loopholes and stuff. And he said, I know about these loopholes in our tax process because I have used them. That was such a drop the mic moment that we all remember. That's when we all felt like, yeah, Trump will speak truth to power. He admitted that he was of the same group of business people when he said that he would utilize those loopholes. We watched his dirty laundry air out, from the Grab Them video to all the women in the Stormy Daniels and all that stuff. And we knew what we were getting into, even if we didn't want to believe it. But many of us trusted him and continue to trust him because we knew that he loved this country and what this country has to offer. And I think we expected him to have had amassed so much wealth that it would curtail his urges from wanting to steal from us. But we all knew it. We all knew who we were getting involved with. And to expect him to be someone that he is not is never going to happen. And so that leads me to MTG, who also knew exactly what she was getting into with President Trump. The truth of the matter is that MTG did pigeonhole herself. And I'm not buying this idea that she did not want to run for office. She didn't have any other plans, all this other stuff, because clearly she did. But what she recognized is that there was a credibility problem. Because as you just heard, she mentioned that she had a poll showing that she would win a primary.
Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene says that she has the polling that shows her winning primary fights for Senate and governor. Well, we asked her today if she plans to run for either office.
I'm thankful to so many people across the state of Georgia that support me and that are urging me right now. I'll be making a decision pretty soon, but I haven't made one yet. Pretty much any politician polls and explores potential runs, especially when they have the opportunity to do so. But again, I haven't made a decision, but I will make one soon.
But President Trump said that his poll showed her losing to Ossoff, which was in a general. All of a sudden, it seems like right after that, like during that time when she was giving those interviews and she was contemplating and still trying to think about whether or not she should run for office, something did happen. She started becoming a little bit more vocal about things that we knew would sort of put a damper on what President Trump was doing. When I heard her mention that we need to look at the deportation process and not necessarily just kind of snatch everyone up and get rid of people and put people out, that we need to look at this from a different approach because she's in construction.
As a conservative and as a business owner in the construction industry and as a realist, I can say we have to do something about labor, and that needs to be a smarter plan than just rounding up every single person and deporting them just like that.
That made me question some things because I'm like, that was not what you were saying prior to Trump running for office. Also, when I heard her on The View, it feels like a different type of Marjorie Taylor Greene. When I heard her apologize for her rhetoric on CNN, it did give me a bit of a pause.
We have seen these kinds of attacks or criticism from the president at other people. It's not new. And with respect, I haven't heard you speak out about it until it was directed at you.
Dana, I think that's fair criticism. And I would like to say humbly, I'm sorry for taking part in the toxic politics. It's very bad for our country. And it's been something I've thought about a lot, especially since Charlie Kirk was assassinated, is that I'm only responsible for myself and my own words and actions. And I am committed, and I've been working on this a lot lately, to put down the knives in politics. I really just want to see people be kind to one another.
I've always taken MTG as someone who stood on what she believed, even though I may have disagreed. She has led the charge when it comes to the aggressiveness in her speech. We've all witnessed it. My husband and I was together, and I remember talking to her, and she mentioned to me that she was asked to endorse Herschel Walker. And she didn't say that she felt 100% comfortable with it, but she felt like she had to do what she was asked to do. And that's where I look at this entire picture, and I feel like what's happening right now is something that we all struggle with. And it's courage. You see, it's easy to have courage when you're fighting against the easy stuff, when you're fighting against the things that majority of people disagree with. But where your courage really shows up is when you're fighting against the hard stuff. It's when you are not doing all the things that people asked you to do, knowing that it wasn't necessarily what you wanted to do, but you did it anyway in order to maintain whatever little bit of power or control that you currently had. It does feel like Marjorie Taylor Greene started speaking out more vocally against some of the things that she did not agree with him on when he did not endorse her or did not push her to run for a bigger office. But here's what I want. I want what the people want. I want we the people to understand that we the people should never turn a faction into a party. We shouldn't elect someone who's president of our faction. We look for people who are going to do what they said they're going to do, who stands on our foundational values that we all lead, the thing that connects all the factions. We do our duty no matter who says it or who's behind it. We do our duty because it's the right thing to do, and that is up to us, we the people, to control the direction of this country. We need to create a habit of hearing all angles. We need to create a habit of understanding all sides of arguments so that we can then do our job, so that breakups like this doesn't fracture us. We must stay united. We must stand strong. I'm praying for both MTG and President Trump that they would either salvage this relationship and be able to move forward, because she still needs to get things done. But I really want us to focus on where we are, what we believe, and who we are as voters, and not get caught up in all of this back and forth. And when you see ambition starting to rise, you have to put it in a chokehold. Hold it down and stay focused on the mission that's at hand. And that's doing what's right for the people. Until next time, stay unafraid, stay unapologetic, and never stop seeking the truth.